Hi, my lovelies. Today I am going to tell a story of a different kind than my normal content. I am going to talk about a subject that I've kind of hid. Some people are aware of it, some people are not, but my paralysis. I wanted to talk about this in August this year because August 1st marked my 20-year anniversary since being paralyzed from the chest down. I had seen in the last couple of videos there were some comments talking about one person in particular made a comment about being in a wheelchair, and a lot of people responded and they did not know. I had talked about this a couple of times in a couple of very old videos, but it's something that I don't usually talk about a whole lot. And last August was the 20-year anniversary since that paralysis, and so it's not a subject I'm touchy about. It's not a sensitive subject for me. It's not anything traumatic that I'm avoiding or anything like that. I never really thought that it was going to be anything important to my channel, and I still don't. But maybe some people are curious. But for those of you who did not know, or those of you who were curious, I have been an incomplete paraplegic since I was 13 years old. 20 years ago, August 1st, 1998, I woke up from a nap and I couldn't breathe. I was paralyzed pretty much from the chest down. I was diagnosed 2 weeks after with transverse myelitis, which, for lack of a better answer, means swelling of the spinal cord, particularly damage to the myelin sheath, which is that protective layer that normally protects your spinal cord nerves, and resulting in paralysis. So let me rewind a little bit. When I was 13, I was a hellraiser. I was not a good child. I had second child syndrome, and I was a wild child. I was not listening to my body when I was sick. I had mono very, very badly, and I snuck off to a friend's house at a pool party, and I was jumping on the trampoline. I remember this awful, awful pain in between my shoulder blades, and it felt like I was being stabbed. And I got off the trampoline, I sat still for a while, and the pain subsided, and I got back on the trampoline. I was jumping around, and nothing happened immediately. And then 5 days later, I remember I was having an argument with my boyfriend, and he encouraged me to undercoat my car. And I think that's probably when I caused the trauma. This was a very dysfunctional relationship at 13. But I was going to inherit a Mustang. My parents had bought this really awful junker, and they promised that it could be my car if I did all the work for it. Well, this boyfriend was very possessive of some things, and he was determined that I was going to do the body work on it, and then he was going to own the car. And so we got into this argument, and he told me that I needed to undercoat his car. It's like where you spray tar on the underside of a car. We didn't have any kind of a garage or anything like that, so I laid on the gravel driveway and wiggling your way underneath, trying to undercoat the underside of a car. It's a difficult task, and I just remember that pain that I was feeling when I had jumped on the trampoline. That came back, but I wasn't allowed to stop. And when it was done, I had a really, really bad headache. I think it was probably the worst headache I'd ever had in my entire life. I don't recall ever having a headache since then at that magnitude. And I became hysterical because I had never been in so much pain. And my mom, she's a registered nurse, she gave me 2 aspirin, and she told me to go lay down and try to calm down, and the boyfriend wasn't home. And I remember my feet, I was laying in bed, and I remember my feet falling asleep, and they were tingling just like the pins and needles. And I was just in so much pain up here, I wasn't thinking about anything abnormal going on down there. And the pins and needles rose up to my knees, and I remember my right hip went numb first, and then my left hip, and then it came up to my stomach, and by then I was almost asleep. And about an hour or so passed. And I woke up and I was throwing up everywhere. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move very well. I rolled over onto the bed and I tried to sit up and I was very unstable. And I fell onto the floor and I had ceramic tile floor in my bedroom. And I remember feeling how cold the tile was on my hands, but I could not feel how cold it was on my legs. I could feel it, like the pressure of it on my legs, but I couldn't tell you how cold it was. And I think that's when I really started to freak out. And my mom started to realize that maybe I wasn't just being a drama child, but there was actually something either physically or psychologically really wrong with me. So she carried me to the car. Her and my sister carried me down to the car, and we went to the ER. And at the ER, they thought that I was just being a dramatic child. I did not see a neurologist or receive any kind of anti-inflammatory or steroids or anything like that for a couple of days. But in the ER, one of the doctors, Dr. Wang, he picked me up thinking that I was just being dramatic and that I would, as soon as I was about to fall, that I would catch myself, and I didn't. I fell on the floor. And that didn't meet protocol at the hospital at all. But they called a neurologist, a pediatric neurologist, in to take a look at me the next morning, and he could tell from my breathing, and they do this poking test where they poke you with a needle all up and down my legs, and I couldn't tell the difference between that and a cotton swab at the time. And he said, no, there's something really wrong with her. Let's get her an MRI. The MRI showed that there was a blood restriction around T2 to T7, which is, it's hard to demonstrate, but if you can reach your arm all the way to your back, that's probably about T2. T7 is right around probably the bottom of your rib cage. So there was this massive amount of blood restriction in that area. And MRI machines were not nearly as good as they are now, so they didn't really know what was going on. But they thought that it was a swelling issue. I was then given steroids, and they put me in the pediatric recovery ward for a while, and nothing happened for like 7 days. 2 whole days went by. Maybe it was 3 whole days went by. There's documentation of this somewhere, but 3 whole days went by without somebody actually asking me if I needed to go to the bathroom. And when they catheterized me, I think I released over 1,200 cc's of liquid. So if you're in the medical field, you know that is a massive amount of liquid. But my kidneys were starting to suffer. I mean, I just went downhill in that hospital very quickly because nobody really knew what it was that I had. There was no fall, there was no injury, there was no, I mean, you get knocked off of a horse, you get into a car accident, okay, there's trauma, but there wasn't anything with myself. So 7 days went by. This was at the hospital that my mom worked at, and my mom was very frustrated, to say the least, that nobody was trying anything. No one was diagnosing me. No one was giving me any new prognoses. I wasn't improving. So she pulled me out of the hospital and she took me to another hospital. And there I was given a myelogram, where you have dye injected into the base of your spinal cord, and then they look at a radiograph and they can see how far that dye goes up into your spine, and there was a major restriction around T5. So I was given more steroids, more antibiotics, more IVE treatments, and sent home. And that was that for a while. Transverse myelitis was a diagnosis I was given back then. In 1998, the internet was really just like in its baby infant stages. So other than the answers we were given from the doctors, they encouraged me to go to a rehabilitation center where I would be able to focus on physical therapy. And I went to that center about 3 months after my initial diagnosis, and it was more like a nursing home. I can literally say that was the biggest waste of money ever. I think I probably would have gotten more physical therapy staying in a hotel with room service. But nonetheless, I came back out of it, and I was homeschooled for a year. That would have been, no wait, I went back to school in 8th grade, and then I was really, really afraid of going to school for 9th grade because you're going to be a freshman in high school and you're already at the bottom of the food chain, and I had written in my diary I was contemplating ways of ending things, because that was something that I did not think I had the strength or the ability to do. So I finished 8th grade, and then I was able to take basically a year off being homeschooled. And after that, my dad noticed that academically I wasn't doing very good socially. I was starting to become very reclusive. I was very, very depressed and not very active. So they transferred me to a private school, which was probably the best intervention that I ever went through in my life, because I went to a school for half of the school was for developmental and physical disabilities, and then the other half of the school was just a regular private school where all the misfits were sent. And I went to the high school of misfits, but it was the best place because like a fourth of the population in that school were hearing impaired or deaf. So I learned sign language as one of my primary languages as opposed to Spanish or French. I went from completely failing out of my courses in my public school in New York to becoming the valedictorian of this private school. And I just intellectually I blossomed as a person. And I think that struggle was necessary for me to prepare me for adulthood and be relatively normal as an adult. But that happened about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago. I really started to get my shit together around 20, I think. When I was 22, that's a big time gap from like 13 to 20 when I actually had my shit together. Just normal. But I think that given the huge landmark that was for me back in August, I kind of wanted to talk about it. It's not something I'm shy about, so I know that there are people that may have questions for it, and I want you to feel comfortable that you can, if you are curious, feel free to ask. I'm not shy about it. Also, people may notice that there's certain angles of the camera that they don't see me at, and that's because I had a request a very long time ago about doing a tailoring and how people like the sound of footsteps, and I was trying to figure out ways that I could replicate that but not actually be able to walk around your camera. But I'm paralyzed from the chest down. I am termed as Asia B, which means that I have almost normal sensory, with the exception of pain and temperature. So I would be able to stab myself in the leg and I could feel the knife going into my skin, but it would not hurt me. It was very fun when I got my tattoo on my leg, because it didn't hurt at all, and I felt everything, but it didn't hurt. I could set like a pizza box on my lap and I wouldn't be able to tell you if the pizza was hot or cold, but otherwise I have completely normal sensation. At T5, I have restricted use of my diaphragm, so I think that's when I get like my really hefty breathing. That's probably because I can't pull that oxygen or that air down into the bottom portion of my lungs, so I have kind of a shallow breathing, but I have full functionality of these beautiful appendages, and that is something that, having been around persons that are spinal cord injured, specifically with quadriplegia, that is a blessing, is to have all of your 10 digits. Oh my gosh, I am so grateful for my hands and my arms. But that is my childhood and lifehood story. So if you would have any kind of curiosities, don't feel shy. I hide nothing. Even like the super curious questions, I know that there's always the awkward ones, like how do you go to the bathroom, and are you sexually active? And yes, I am. That's very normal. Maybe another reason why I wanted to touch on this topic as well. Boy, this is a weird segment shift here. A couple of weeks ago, Jellybean Green had started another fundraiser, another crowd raiser. Is that what the word is? I know it's not GoFundMe, crowd rise, for special books for special kids. And it is for those that have neurological diversities, particularly those that are adolescents, teenagers, those that are growing up, and they're neurologically different. And we're all human beings, and we're all wonderfully capable of awesome things in the world. And I'm going to link her video to this fundraiser if you would like to partake in it. It's a subject that's quite important and dear to me in my heart, and I really hope that you guys will partake in it and share the love, share the abilities. Okay, my dears, I will see you in the next ASMR video. I won't be so serious next time.